Welcome back to Big Dan's Airgun Review channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Webley Eagle. Now, you knew as a bit of a Webley geek there was no way in hell I was going to let this one slip under the radar. So let's put it in the shoulder and see what we think of it. But first things first, as always, let's have a look at features. Starting off at the rear of the rifle, as you'd guess, we have a nicely finished rubber recoil pad. Next up we get to the cheek piece. Now, it's a kind of ambidextrous cheek piece. It definitely favours the right-handed shooter more than the left. You've got more of a swell on the go with the left-hand side, whereas the right-hand side is a little bit slabbish, shall we say, but I'm sure it would perfectly be usable for any lefties out there. Slightly further along we of course get to the thumb hole stock, and we also get a nice bit of stippling in the grip area. It's also here, I think, if we pan out, you can see where it kind of gets its HW100 kind of vibe from, at least in my perspective anyways. It's a good looking bit of wood, it must be said. As we come further along, we can also see it is of course a side lever action. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the handling section. As we come down a bit, we also get to the match type trigger unit. Now, this is multi-way adjustable for height and direction, and there is also an adjuster built in there to adjust the second stage. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the handling section. There's also the safety in the top of the trigger unit, as can be seen. Again, we'll talk about that a bit later on. A thing that I do absolutely adore about this rifle though, and many of the Turkish rifles on the market, is the scope rail system. It's a twin rail system, so you can use dovetail mounts, or you can have your standard Picatinny Weaver mounts and such like that. Any mounting system will pretty much fit on these rails. It is a superb idea, and I genuinely wish that more airgun manufacturers would use this system. As we come further down in this block is also another really lovely feature, the fact that the Eagle is regulated. So I am really not looking forward to the chronograph test section of this video review. It's 30 degrees, by the way, today. Yeah. As we move slightly further along, we can see there's also an absolutely ginormous 420cc air reservoir on the front end, which mated to the regulator is going to make the shot count test section of this review especially painful. So, yeah. If you don't like these reviews, you'll at least smile at my suffering. As we come further up, we also have the Webley silencer, which comes free with the gun, which we'll do a little bit of testing on later on. Most package silencers are usually a little bit cack, to be honest, so it'd be interesting to see how this one does. That said, we're still not done. You see, there's one feature of this gun that I absolutely love that I wish Kral would hurry up and pull their finger out and get sorted onto their guns as well. The Eagle has a fill probe built into the gun, so you don't have to hunt for your probe at all, and it is, for the love of God, thankfully, the correct size. Kral, stop giving us those crappy adapters and just make your fill probe the right size. And to round it all off, you also get a sling stud at the rear of the rifle as standard, and there's also the capability to fit one on the front end. The adapter is already built into the forestock. Curiously, mine didn't come with the stud. I don't know if many others did, but this one didn't. But it's simply a case of going on Amazon or eBay and picking one up for a couple of quid, simple as, and off you go. It saves you drilling into your stock. And of course, you get 2 magazines as standard with the rifle, which we'll have a little look at a bit later on. So in regards to features, you do get a hell of a lot for your money. As to whether any of it's any good, well, that's what we'll find out a bit later on. If it can't shoot its way out of a paper bag, obviously it doesn't matter if it's made in gold. At the end of the day, you're buying a gun to shoot something, not to hang on your wall. That being said, you could almost hang this on the wall, because it is a bloody pretty looking gun, even for a PCP, it must be said. I'm not a big bottle man. I usually, if I go PCP, I like something a bit more traditional looking. Ideally, I'll just go spring gun, as we both know. But this is a really attractive looking thing, especially with that walnut stock and the Webley motifs everywhere. A lot of effort was put into this, and that's what I really, really like. But that's meaningless if the gun is a load of rubbish. But before we put it in the shoulder, let's move on now to loading the mags, and let's see if these are a little bit tricky or a walk in the park. So, mag loading, what are these like? They're not too bad, but they're a little fussier than some. So what you want to do first is spin the tray around on the top the whole way around. One thing I will mention, if you can see that, they're very smooth. If you can see that there. Usually you get a little bit of grittiness with a new mag, but these are very slick, it must be said. So, first pellet, you're going to have to spin the mag around and load it in arse backwards. So, don't get me wrong, it's not the only magazine on the planet that does it this way, but it is a little bit annoying. To be fair, I wouldn't really want to have to load mags in the field and such on a moonlit night and have to spin that around and make sure you get your pellet in right and all that sort of thing. But I suppose, to be fair, the counter argument to that is, well, you got 2 mags, how many rabbits are you going to shoot in one night, Dan? You should load them before you go. So there is that too, but it's worth mentioning. But that's pretty much loading the mags. So simply put your pellets in one by one through the top until you're done, and then you're ready to go shooting. So with that out of the way, let's put the rifle in the shoulder and see what we think. Okay then, so handling. What do we think of the Webley Eagle? It's an odd creature, because looking at it, you would think that's going to be absolutely heavy as sin. At the end of the day, you've got a huge chunky walnut stock on the back and middle, and you've got a huge buddy bottle on the front end, 420 cc's, I believe. However, it's actually nowhere near as cumbersome as what you might think it's going to be. In fact, I have shot, because the first thing I thought when I looked at this was ATA airborne, basically, but it is comfortably lighter than an airborne. In fact, dare I say it, for risk of being hung, drawn and quartered by the ATA fan club, and it is a lovely gun, the airborne, I'd never knock an airborne, please, don't kill me. It feels like a more refined airborne. It's lighter than the airborne. I think the barrel is also, pardon me if I'm wrong, but is comfortably shorter than the airborne as well, which I think helps it feel a bit more compact and manageable. Now, one thing I will say to sort of put that into consideration though, is I have got a rather hefty Conus Pro 6-24x44 on here, which is sitting on the rear section of the rail, which is no doubt going to be shifting some weight back. And obviously the weight in your shoulder on a PCP usually makes the front end feel a bit lighter. However, what I will say balance-wise, you can see here, despite how it looks, it's pretty much smack on dead center, maybe slightly favouring the front end by a tiny little bit. Oh, I nearly had it then. But that is a lovely feeling gun. It really is. In fact, whilst I wouldn't say you'd want to hunt with it all day long, you could definitely take it on a walk with you. I mean, you've even got, sorry, I had a bug on my arm if you couldn't tell, a sling swivel built in as standard, and you've got the capability to basically do what you want up here. The other thing I'm going to mention, the hole that my finger accidentally slipped into, that almost sounds like a title of a Bond film, doesn't it, to an extent? Anyway, moving on. The slot in here where you've got the fill probe, it is the correct size probe. Hallelujah. I know I think I might have already gone on a rant about the certain other built-in probes on the market by the manufacturers, but that is really nice. Which also leads me on to another silly little thing I'm going to mention. You might, if you've seen much of my channel, I criticise the Crowell Puncher Pro 500, which again, beautiful gun, I will say that, fantastic gun. But they've not really, with those ones anyway, they didn't really leave enough fat on the walls of the stock here, where that probe housing is. And it felt a little sharp on your fingers because of it. This though is lovely and smooth, and it's finished nicely, and it does just, even with your hand, as you can see there, completely covering it, you don't really feel it as much as other guns that have a similar design. But we've perved enough over the stock and such like that, and there is a negative, in fact 2 negatives I'm going to throw our way now, just in case you're worried I'm swooning and I've sold myself out because it's got a Webley logo on the front. Number 1, you'll know it's coming. Trigger guard. Plastic. You've gone out of your way. Don't get me wrong, it's a budget gun. We charge £520 for these, shameless plug. But you've gone out of your way to put this gorgeous thumbhole walnut stock on here. And even the trigger blade itself. Now I'm not the sort of person that pervs over trigger blades, but that is one of the nicest made trigger mechanisms that I have seen pretty much on this entire channel. The thought that's gone into it is lovely. And then they just went, chuck a plastic guard on there, that'll do. That'll get the job done, sorted. I don't know anything about manufacturing. I don't know what the costs are to make trigger guards and such like that, but Webley, please, if you're listening, make that metal. Go on, that would be absolutely gorgeous. Again, maybe we're being a bit pedantic picking on it, considering everything else the gun's got going for it, but when you see it, you can't not see it. The other thing I'm going to mention is, and this I genuinely don't like, The safety, you probably knew this was coming. Now, I personally don't like safeties being built in the trigger mechanism. I've also discovered the thing that I hate more than that are safeties that are built above the trigger mechanism. So far above the trigger mechanism that you can probably see, they've had to cut a little bit out of the stock there just so you can get to it, get your finger on it. Again, give them credit, attention to detail. They have thought to do that because obviously they've tested the gun and such like that. And that I do give them credit for, we've got to be honest. But at the same time, why? Why did you put it there? And every now and again it's a bit notchy. I mean, it's not too bad. It's probably one of those things where it'll wear in with use, but I don't like it. Give me a little toggle here or something, or even something up the side or at the back here if you can do that. Much better. Don't like this, but again, most of you probably love it. It's probably me just being a bit of a big dope. The other thing I'm going to mention, and this is the main bit that's interesting, we might have mentioned it earlier, this gun is actually short stroked. Now you don't usually get that, to be fair, on many out-of-the-box PCPs, if any of them. Even if you spend a couple of £1,000 on a gun, you won't get something like this. This is really clever. I like this. So, with the short stroking, usually with the side lever, as soon as you start moving that back, you start decompressing, or compressing I should say, the spring inside the block. With this though, as you can probably see, it's loosey-goosey. Now the reason for that, do you know what? Why am I showing you like this? Let's put you down on the table and let's actually show you what's going on with this. So instead of talking about the interesting cocking mechanism on this gun, we might as well show it to you. So essentially what you have is an extremely long hammer, as you can see there, and a short spring that's also on a short stroke system, as you'll see now. So as you can see, I can bring that cocking lever back pretty much the entire way of, or the entire amount of its stroke I should say, and it's not actually moving that hammer or spring at all. That's because it's short stroked. Now the reason for that is to eliminate what we might have mentioned earlier, hammer bounce. Hammer bounce is when, pretty much as the name suggests, the hammer hits the valve which is tucked away in here and repeatedly after the shot cycle bounces against that valve, like so. With this setup, that short stroke spring and that long hammer, what that's essentially getting around, apologies for the banging sound, it's the stock gently bouncing off the table there. What that's essentially doing is stopping or minimalising the amount of bounce that can be on the valve itself. Now I'm going to show you now, we're going to do a little bit of camera trickery. So if I click my fingers, you can see there just how little room there is at the end of that chamber. So there should, in theory, have very little reason or way of having any bounce off of that valve and that spring, as there's far less room to move. So with that out of the way, let's keep our eyes on that hammer, that big silver bit, and let's see if that bounces back. Looked pretty sweet to me. That said, I can still hear, I think, a little bit of hammer bounce on the go. There's a little brrrt at the end of the shot cycle, but compared to most out-of-the-box guns, whether that's budget or even expensive, to be honest, there's some big brands out there that do suffer with hammer bounce, that is a massive step up. It really is, and really clever engineering on the go as well. Granted, when it comes to air efficiency, you need to balance it up with the rest of the gun, the regulator, transfer port, such like that. But at the same time, that's a really nice thing to see. But anyways, that's the short stroke hammer system. Go on, go away. Go back to handling, you. Okay, so you're back with me? I can jabber on again? Good, that's the way it should be. That's the way we like it. But yeah, you can see why that's done, and it's a really clever system. So you can probably tell, what with that great big bottle on there and the regulator built in on board, I am really not looking forward to the chronograph test when it comes up. In fact, I'm putting that off as much as I can, as you can probably tell. But it's a really clever system. I do like that. In general, the gun is absolutely lovely, but we can't say too much. One of the most important things is the trigger. So let's have a little look at that. So let's bring that back. In fact, I'll tell you what, let's load this mag in there as well, because there's some clever stuff going on with here too. Right, so inside the breech, we have a magnet. You probably can't see that. Don't know why I'm even bothering, because there's a scope on that end and sort of the rest of the block on that end. Take my word for it, there's a magnet in there. On the bottom of the mag, you have another magnet. We've seen this on a few other guns, but it's a really nice feature. So literally, all you do, is line the groove up like so. And again, I didn't look on the other side to line it up. It's just nice and easy to do. And the nice thing about this is, say if you're hunting of a night or low light conditions and you don't want to fumble with your mag, as long as you've got it semi-lined up, it'll literally, if you can see this, suck itself in, just like that. Brilliant idea. So let's close that side lever. That was smooth. I'll tell you that here and now. I had a feeling these mags were going to be good when we was loading them earlier because they're very slick. Right then, so let's have a go at that trigger. I'm going to take aim at the mound. Of course, it'd help if the safety was off. There we go. Right, take aim at the mound. So we do have a first. If you can see that, I hope you can. It's quite nice. Hang on, let me have another go. That is really, really nice, that cocking. It really is. Right, so it's a strange one. So the second stage, I will say this, has got no creep on it whatsoever. In fact, I could happily little finger that. Hang on, let's get that done. So we can little finger it. Again, hopefully you can see this. Safe direction, leaning forwards a bit. There you go, little finger. But the second stage is a little numb, hard to explain. So you sort of get there on second and it just takes a little bit more to pull than what I'd like. Now we have done a pull weight test on this and it's actually really not bad at all. It's about 2 pounds, which is perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually quite nice. But it just feels a little dull maybe on second. That, to be fair, overuse, triggers do polish themselves through. So over time, I'm sure that would crisp up a bit and probably just become a really nice trigger, to be fair. But maybe if you just take that little bit of pull out on second, it would have been just that little bit sweeter. But again, it is still a really nice unit. I've got to say that. There's no creep, which is the main thing. And it's not really heavy, just maybe a little heavier than I'd like it to be. It is an adjustable unit. What I will say though is we have had the stock off. I thought I'd have a little look, see what makes this gun tick. And there is, sadly, an adjuster, an adjustment screw. But for me at least, having a play with it with this one, all it seemed to really do is put a little bit more creep on second. It made it lighter, but it just made it a little creepy before it actually broke. So the standard configuration, at least with this one, was the screw wound pretty much the whole way in where you get this. And to be fair, I don't think it's going to cause any accuracy issues. It's still really nice, but I don't know, it could just maybe polish itself through a little bit over time. In general, that is a really, really nice gun. And there is one other little feature with this that we might have mentioned earlier I'm a massive fan of. Let's get that out of there. So let's say you want to use this for target work, which is mainly how this is going to be used. Most of the time you'll use a single shot tray, and you'll notice with this it doesn't come with one, but there's a really good reason for that. The block, as you can see towards the breech, is actually cut away on both sides here, and what that does, obviously I don't have a pellet in my hand, but imagine that I do, you can easily pop the pellet directly into the breech, so no having to worry about your single shot tray being a bit rough or something like that, or sometimes the pellet potentially getting a little damaged as the probe sends it home. You can literally feed it directly into the breech, ready to fire. That is a fantastic idea, and there are some target guns and such that are already like this, but that is really, really good. Well done, Webley, on that. So in general, it is a really, really nicely set up gun. I will say that. A couple of little nitpicks, plastic and the safety I'm not a big fan of, but the rest of it is really quite nice. So, I've got to sit here for about an hour and a half now, haven't I, and see what this gun can do through the chronograph. See, I'd love to be able to get away with not doing that, but I know none of you would actually let me do it. Some of you actually know where I live, so without further ado, let's go suffer in front of a chronograph. So as always, we move on to our 27 yards accuracy testing. We're going to use a smattering of pellets, which we're going to fire downrange from our rested position. And the best pellets for our 27 yard test, we'll move on to our 45 yard test. Weather conditions, well, it's beautiful sunshine, roasting hot, and it stinks because they've been spreading dung all over the fields next to me. Be glad you don't have smell-o-vision. Wind-wise, it's not too bad. We get the occasional little gust blast through. You'll probably see the target buffet against the wind, but we'll time our shots around it and see how we get on. So, 27 yards accuracy testing. Let's see how she does. So imagine my disgust. Obviously there's the table and everything sitting there. Just doing a quick test on the Superdomes, and I notice when I press the stop recording button, nothing happens. Because I picked the GoPro up and it's for some reason asking me the date and time because it didn't record. Superdomes just did that. One hole. So now we have to hope we can do it again on camera. I hope we can, as I don't want this to be a case of, yeah, but ignore that. But here's what we did earlier. Bugger. So now we're at part 2 of accuracy testing. We've moved the target back to 45 yards as per usual. We're going to be using the best pellets at our 27-yard test and basically see how the rifle and pellets perform at the longer distance, which all sounds well and good. The bad news is the weather has decided to turn nasty, and looking at the weather forecast, we are predicted for the next good few days gusty winds, and that's what sadly we're dealing with now. It's definitely not ideal shooting conditions, but we should still hopefully get an idea as to what the gun can do at longer ranges. So this is going to be fun. Well, now we've dealt with more wind than a hippo in the cabbage aisle, it's time to take a look at our results. The wind, unfortunately, as I'm sure you could tell, played a massive factor in our testing, with the occasional wild flyer and the unwanted but much needed cardio exercises, as I had to keep resetting the target. Superdomes had 2 unfortunate shots that went wayward, but other than this we had 3 shots practically one on top of the other in a group measuring 0.49 of an inch. Not bad considering the conditions. JSB Express also did well with a 0.65 inch 4-shot group with 1 flyer. Not bad at all. Then after this I decided to bring out the JSB Heavies to see if the added weight can combat the wind. The first group once again gave us 2 flyers as the wind picked up, but we managed a 3-shot cluster measuring 0.36 of an inch. Being a bit of a man-child, I then decided to give them another try and, well, to be frank, the wind wasn't playing ball for the first group. As soon as I'd stopped, however, I noticed the wind calmed down slightly, and using the Viking as an aiming point, we managed a 5-shot group measuring 0.7 of an inch. And in this weather, better yet, we had the tightest 3-shot cluster at 0.27 of an inch. It's such a shame that the weather has been absolutely rubbish, as there's more than enough evidence with the clusters on show that the Eagle has an absolute ton of potential for accuracy, even at long range, especially in calmer conditions once it's been leaded in. But with accuracy testing out of the way, we need to see how it all comes together and see just what we think of the Webley Eagle. So then, the final verdict of the Webley Eagle, and what do we think? Personally, I think it's a fantastic demonstration that the budget rifles have pretty much caught up with the premium gear. You could place the Eagle alongside some vastly more expensive rifles and it'd still stand out, not just for looks, but its build quality alone. Well, barring the trigger guard. That being said, I do still have a few nitpicks with the rifle, as after all, no rifle is perfect. For starters, as mentioned, the plastic trigger guard is a bit of a shame, as the rest of the rifle screams quality. The rest of my nitpicks aren't complaints as such, but missed opportunities. The trigger, for instance, is a superbly built unit, but the second stage is just a little bit numb. Not heavy at all, but if it could be just a tiny bit sharper, it'd be phenomenal. Also, despite the anti-hammer bounce system in place, the shot count for a larger bottle was a bit average. This is mainly due to the regulator pressure being a bit too high for a 2.2, at around 105 bar. That said, make no mistake, the rifle still has plenty of shots, but with some minor tweaks this could easily go above 200 shots per fill. Again, it's just a missed opportunity, but not a negative as such. The safety is also not my cup of tea at all, but then again, plenty out there will no doubt probably love it. So now the good stuff. The gun is built. The finish on the stock is absolutely stunning, and the attention to detail puts many premium rifles to shame. The inletting is also absolutely perfect, which is another nice touch. As for the metalwork, well, you won't find much bluing or blacking, but the metal itself is lovely and chunky. You really do get a feeling that a Challenger tank could run this thing over, and it'll probably hobble to its feet and proclaim, "'Tis but a flesh wound." It's smartly designed as well, what with the short stroke cocking mechanism, cutout breech and floating hammer system. The regulator, although set slightly high, also did a superb job for an out-of-the-box rifle, with more than a few duplicate shots on show. Even the package Webley silencer that comes with the rifle is genuinely good, and the mags are very slick as well. As for downrange, as I'm sure you can see from the footage, the weather was an absolute bastard during filming. However, we still managed some superb groups. The highlight being the JSB Heavies at 45 yards, with the whole grouping being 0.7 of an inch, and the 3-shot cluster coming out at 0.27 of an inch. I don't think it's unfair to say that in calm conditions, half-inch groups would be more than achievable. Bear in mind this is a brand new not run-in rifle as well. It's probably no surprise that I think many will really rather love the Eagle. The attention to detail is just something else at this price, and the performance speaks for itself. With that said, I want to say thanks to everyone watching, and our next review will be something a little bit different. We'll see you next time.